So let's talk about some myths out there. Myth number one is that everyone thinks that every lake in Minnesota has aquatic invasive species, zebra mussels, Eurasian water milfoil, something in it. That's just not true. Over 90% of the lakes in Minnesota are free of any type of aquatic invasive species. So let's talk about some myths out there. Myth number two, I can't do anything about it. This problem is way too big. Back in 2016, 35% of the boats entering access had some type of problem with it or issue. Today, that number is around 1 to 2%. We are making a difference, Minnesota. Keep up the good work. So let's talk about some myths out there. A popular myth out there is that when we get aquarium pets, that the best thing to do for them when we're done with them or we want to change out our tank is just release them into the wild. Something will eat them. Nothing could be further from the truth. Remember, these type of plants and animals, they have no natural predators here. So they end up taking over a lake or a river and they outcompete everything. So it's actually releasing a dangerous animal into the wild. If it's time for you to give up your exotic pet, you can go to the Minnesota Aquarium Society online and they have surrender events that you're able to do that in a humane way. If it's time for you to give up your exotic pet, go to your local retailer and see if they have some type of adoption program, or even your veterinarian has some type of adoption program or way to help you in that matter. Another way is to communicate with other hobbyists or people that like pets or animals and just donate it to them. So let's talk about some myths out there. A lot of people think that, well, nobody else is doing this aquatic invasive species thing except me. What we found is that there's the float plane industry, which is going out there decontaminating float planes. There's boats being made to distribute and get out the bilge water that's in there, specially designed just for that. So there's a whole industry supporting the work that you do. So let's talk about some myths out there. A lot of people are sometimes intimidated by seeing an inspector at the access. They're really just there for information sharing and helping you get to know the laws. They're not there to prosecute or start any problems. They just want to help protect our lakes. And you might learn about a great spot to go fishing that day on that lake. So we're always thinking about decontaminating boats and cleaning them and making that. But do we ever think about our gear, our life vest, our aqua shoes, our nets and stuff that we bring with us? There's actually a simple way to take care of that. Just take your gear, throw it in the shower, turn it as hot as you can, and leave it there for about 10 minutes. In most showers, that will decontaminate any of your gear. 90% of our problems with AIS can be eliminated with 3 simple steps: clean, drain, and dry your boat.
Way back in my childhood, back before when I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, we went on a camping trip with me and my family to an old cabin that was next to a river with a rope swing. And we were there previously, so I really remembered having a really good time on the rope swing. We got to the cabin, I went running down to the river to the rope swing, and the river was covered in water hyacinth. And water hyacinth is a very invasive plant that takes over whole water bodies. And I was exceptionally depressed because I couldn't go swimming in the swimming hole with the rope swing. I didn't know it at the time because, you know, it was back in the 70s and we didn't really do a lot of invasive species work or a lot of invasive species education, so I had no idea what it was or what they were doing or how it got there or anything. All I remember is being a kid, being highly depressed because I couldn't swim in the river. And now they actually have a good biological control for water hyacinth with weevils and some beetles and a moth that do very good control of these invasive plants. I look at that and I remember that whole incident and try to compare it to the stuff that we're fighting today, which is zebra mussels, starry stonewort, and all this other stuff. And hopefully we will find a very good biological control for these invasive species within time. And that's my first aquatic invasive species encounter, even though I didn't know it at the time. In the Beltrami County, we have a real problem with starry stonewort and zebra mussels. Right now, the research is coming close to a solution to manage these populations. It won't get rid of them, so our best bet is to prevent their spread. And as that research gets closer and closer to a management technique, we're hoping that it will be a simple, easy thing. But right now, we need to prevent the spread of these things because we have no management technique for them, and they make drastic changes in the ecology of the lakes. Lifts and docks need to be dried for 21 days before they're moved, and that's a state law. And the reason for this is that we can't get into all the pipes and everything to kill everything. So you want to make sure that it dries out really well, so that way you're not transporting a live infestation of zebra mussels or other aquatic organisms to another water body that doesn't have these things. So if you do buy a lift or a dock or any rafts or anything, make sure they've dried for at least 21 days before you launch them into new water bodies. Lily pads they're more like boats because they're not anchored in the water. If you do have them anchored in the water, you should definitely dry them for 21 days. But the ones that I usually deal with are they bring them with them to the water access, they use them at that day, and then they roll them back up and bring them home. So in those situations, it's not really a moored piece of equipment. It's just in the water and out of the water, kind of like a boat is. So just make sure that you're rinsing it off between uses or drying it really well. If you are going from lake to lake within 4 days, even though you don't use your live wells or anything like that, what you want to do is you still want to flush hot water through your live wells and bilges, because the lines underneath the boat will usually get water in them whether you use your live well or not. So you want to make sure that you flush that with hot water so that you're pushing out any zebra mussel veligers or killing anything that's in there, so that you're not transporting it to a new water body. So in Beltrami County, during our watercraft inspection programs, we find that about 30% of our boaters are going to different water bodies within 4 days. This is not launching back into the same water body, it's going to a completely different water body. And these boaters are actually a pretty high risk, and we would love those people to come through our decon machine, but you don't necessarily have to do that, but you should do that extra flushing with hot water through your live well. Hot tap water will work. Get a gallon of hot tap water, put it in your live well, throw it into your bilge, just to clear out all those lines underneath. 30% of our boaters are actually like 900 people. So we really want to get that person that's going from lake to lake to be able to flush out their live wells so that they're not transporting anything alive to other water bodies. One of the things that we have been finding about invasive species is that people that don't want their goldfish anymore or any other fish, they have actually been releasing it out into the wild. And this is something that you should not do. We don't know if that creature will be able to survive in Minnesota's waters or not, even though a lot of them are tropical and they probably won't, but still they will survive for a while. But if by some chance that they do survive and they do become established, they might become an invasive species. So you do not want to release your aquarium pets or any other your pets out into the wild. Technically, you really shouldn't even flush down a dead goldfish down your toilet. The other thing about goldfish, a lot of people don't know, is they will alter the water body and basically make their own habitat. This is also common carp will do this too. That's why common carp are usually in degraded waters, because they tend to dig around in the mud and muck and basically root up plants. So, and goldfish aren't that extreme, but they are extreme enough to change the water body and the environment that they're in. An invasive species is something that harms the environment, economy, or human health, and gets there by human help. So it's not something that will get here naturally. Zebra mussels never in a million years would have gotten here by themselves. We brought them here, and humans are moving around so much and we're moving around so fast that we're bringing things with us and out and about. And that's what an invasive species is. If something came up here naturally from like Louisiana, swam all the way upriver, that was a native species in Louisiana, we wouldn't call it an invasive species because it got here naturally. So invasive species are stuff that get here non-naturally, and they do damage to human health, environment, or economy. So you got to remember that invasive species is something that does damage. And not necessarily, like a good example would be lilac bushes. They're non-native. but they don't really damage anything. Animals still use them, people love them, and they're non-native species that's not an invasive species. I always get a lot of people that come up to me and go, well, humans are invasive. I go, well, no, because we got there by our own will and our own abilities. I talk to different boaters that always say that invasive species are going to get everywhere because the waterfowl and other animals spread them. Well, the invasive species that we are trying to prevent the spread of aren't really designed to travel on waterfowl or get transported by other animals. So we are trying to prevent the long travel that we do for invasive species. I've seen pictures of crayfish with zebra mussels on the side, and they say crayfish are breeding these things all over the place. Well, the crayfish is gonna go across the road. He's not gonna travel 200 miles up the Lake of the Woods or all the way down to Mille Lacs from Lake of the Woods like spiny water flea did. We are the ones transporting these things around, and we just have to change our behavior a little bit to stop that. And we're getting wiser and wiser in our ability to fight these things. Because before, like the old cane toad in Australia, that's a huge problem there. No one did any studies on it. They just saw this toad that was out in the sugarcane field and brought it across the oceans to help them with a problem that they were having in Australia, and it didn't do anything because no one studied it. So we are a lot wiser nowadays. We like to study our things, find out what's happening with them, find out how we can make sure that they're not going to be invasive, and then also that they are going to give some benefit to us. So that's one of my other things that I get a lot of questions about. So in Beltrami County, we try to promote that our inspectors are there to help boaters. They're not there to check to make sure that you're doing it correctly. You're not there to check up on you and give you tickets or anything. We can't do that. We're there to help you follow the laws so that you become a more knowledgeable boater and form habits that will prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. My inspectors are out there to help you. They're not there to yell at you or tell you that you're doing a bad job. And actually, I always tell them, if you see someone doing something good, tell them. You know, say, hey, you're doing a great job, have a good day. Of course, we have to do the survey because the DNR wants us to do that. And we have to follow certain protocols because they're watercraft inspectors. But we do try to promote that we're there to help you. We're a team. We are trying to prevent the spread all together. It's not just one person. That DNR survey that we perform at the accesses, what that does is gives us a lot of data on boat movement, not person movement, but boat movement, and where we have high threatening water bodies. Because a lot of people in Beltrami County, what they will do is they go from Cass Lake and Andrusia up to Big Lake. And we also find that there's boaters that are going from lake to lake to lake within 4 days. So with that knowledge, we look at what we can train and what we can teach boaters on what to do. So with that, the whole jumping from lake to lake is perfectly fine because it's a natural resource. We want to keep those natural resources open. It's just that the boater needs to learn how to prevent the spread when he goes from lake to lake. So you're out fishing all day and you want to keep your live bait for tomorrow. What you need to do is drain the water that you got the bait in and put new water in that was in your vehicle or on land. And of course, you're going to want to make sure you keep it cold because you don't want to throw hot water on minnows because that will kill them just like it will kill zebra mussels. And any water that you've had out on the lake needs to be drained when you come off except for your drinking water. So always try to travel with another cooler of water in your truck or vehicle so that you have cold water to save those minnows with. If you're not going to save them and you're done, do not release them out into the wild. They probably have some disease on them that a live minnow will be able to spread versus a dead minnow. What you need to do is pack in, pack out, so that way you are packing your minnows out and disposing of them properly. Either composting or throwing them in the trash so someone can, and kind of wrap them in a bag too so they don't stink so bad. Our inspectors are out there to help each other, help you, help us. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all in this together. So if we can all learn from each other, from my inspectors learn from boaters even sometimes about how their boats and stuff work. So we are there to help each other, and being on the same team, we are there to help prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Because we definitely want to prevent the spread of these things because it's a lot cheaper not to have it in the water body than it is to have some in the water body. Whenever you go off to college, you know, some people like to have their aquariums for nice relaxing atmosphere in their dorm rooms. But at the end of the semester, what do you do with that? people have been releasing those into the wild, especially into Lake Bemidji, and you cannot do that. It's against law. So we really don't want to do that. We don't want to release our aquariums into the natural environment. We want to make sure that we take care of those responsibly. And responsibly means do a little research, figure out where the best way to dispose of this animal is at, or try to find someone else that will take it. Another hobbyist will a lot of times take your pets for you. So another interesting story about invasive species and how they get around. There was a retail store up in the Northeast that ordered a bunch of palm plants. And when they got these plants into the store, they heard frog chirpings. And they're going, what the heck? So they did an examination on all their plants and they found a bunch of Cuban tree frogs in the plants that they ordered. That's how a new species can transport a very long distance from one point to another. If those things got out, they could possibly very well have become an invasive species because there was more than one. Another one that was very recent that people might have heard about is the moss balls that were transported all over the United States, and they had zebra mussels inside of them. And these moss balls, what you do is with them is you put them into aquariums or water ponds so that they look nice. They clean the water, and some types of fish will eat on them. So people were buying them for their aquariums and their water gardens, but they have zebra mussels in them. So when those zebra mussels get into that water body, they will start reproducing, and then your water has all the zebra mussels in it, and then when you flush out your water, exchange it, you're putting zebra mussel veligers out into the wild. So we really got to make sure that we're checking all the stuff that we buy that is exotic. And I say exotic versus invasive because exotic is fun and happy, and invasive is something that hurts. Like zebra mussels cause harm, so we want to make sure that we're not transporting those around. I know a few people that have aquariums with frogs in them, tropical frogs, that actually they love them because they use live plants and everything else. But since they know me, they are very careful about what they do with their plant cuttings and any animals that they have extra that they need to get rid of. I work for the Beltrami County Environmental Services Aquatic Invasive Species Program, and I was up in Upper Red Lake, and I was waiting for one of my inspectors to show up for work. And so while I was there, I was doing some surveys, and this boat comes out of the water with 3 guys in it, and I approach them, I say who I am, and I ask them if they've talked to an inspector before. And almost all 3 of them go, yeah, we've heard this all before, we know exactly what we're doing. And I go, okay. So I just sit back and do my survey and ask some questions here and there. And I watched those guys work on their boat, and they took their bait, they pulled them out of the bait thing, threw it in another bucket that's in their vehicle. They did everything right, and everything was perfect. Then I saw this guy grab a jug of water, went to his bait well, and started pouring water into his bait well. And I started thinking, well, they're gonna put that bait back into the bait well in the boat, and that's not right because you have to have the plug out, so what's going on here? So I went up to him and I said, wait a second, what are you guys doing here? And I go, you can't transport that water. He goes, oh no, this is water that we've had in our cab on the pickup, and we're gonna go fishing after lunch at another water body, so I'm just flushing everything out. And that made me feel really good, and especially since I asked him where he learned how to do that, and he said Lake Bemidji, which is one of our lakes, one of my inspectors. So he learned that from one of my inspectors, and he was the first person I ever saw do that for his live well and bilge. So it was very gratifying. A good tip if you're going to go to another water body within 4 days is to take a jug of hot water with you and let it heat up in the car. That way you can just pour the water through the boat and push out anything that's in there. Float planes they're trying to take off, so they don't want stuff on their floats, and they don't want water in their floats because it's extra weight, uses extra fuel. And they have pumps in there, and one of the main protocols is to fly over the water body that they just left, empty the pumps with the bilge pumps, and put the rudders up and down to knock any other plants and stuff off before they go to another water body. I'm Bruce with Beltrami County's Aquatic Invasive Species Program. And if you find an aquatic invasive species, what you want to do is either contact your county environmental services, soil and water conservation district, or the Minnesota DNR invasive species specialist for your region. Report it to them, take pictures if you can, And then that way someone will come out and check it out. In Beltrami County, we had a person call the invasive species specialist from the DNR about some possible starry stonewort in a location that we didn't know that it was there. And me and the homeowner went to the different spots and checked out, and he actually let me use his kayak to get out into the water farther to check various spots where he's done. And we didn't find any starry stonewort, but we did find some native Cara that looks real similar to starry stonewort, and he was all apologetic, saying, "I just wasted your time," and everything like this. And I told him about 50 times that no, he's not wasting my time. We need people to look for stuff and report it to us. Even if it's not invasive, we will still go out and look at it to check to make sure that it is not invasive, because we need everyone working together in order to solve this problem of where we have invasive species and where we need to be extra cautious at. We need people to look for stuff and report it to us. Even if it's not invasive, we will still go out and look at it to check to make sure that it is not invasive, because we need everyone working together in order to solve this problem of where we have invasive species and where we need to be extra cautious at. I wanted to talk a little bit about kayaks because I bought a kayak, and before I bought a kayak, I always thought kayaks were a really low threat level on the transporting aquatic invasive species. But after I bought it, I found out that every time I step into the water, I bring mud and dirt and plants with me into the bottom of the kayak, and then my kayak is enclosed. So I have a really hard time getting all that gravel and all those plants out of there. So every time I use my kayak now, I always have to go inside and get a bucket of hot water and throw it in my kayak and swish it around, and then try to empty it all, which I never accomplish emptying all the water and all the gravel out of there. So if you do have one of those enclosed kayaks, you want to really make sure that you are decontaminating your inside the kayak. I have all sorts of gravel and mud and plants in there, but I work very hard to get it out.
When you take your watercraft out for a day on the lake, either if it's recreational or just a day out fishing, you come into the access and you see a watercraft inspector on site, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is this guy looking for? Well, a watercraft inspector's main goal is to educate the public and to help you come into compliance when you're at the access. So basically, that watercraft inspector is going to greet you. He's going to inspect your watercraft and ask you a few questions. These questions are really important for AIS coordinators like myself, because all of this data is used for AIS prevention and protection goals. And so every year I look at this data to see where we need to prioritize and strategize to where to put watercraft inspectors for the best education efforts and the best way we can reach as many boaters as possible throughout the season. You hear the clean, drain, dry. So the big things that you want to do when you enter into access is be clean of any aquatic plants and free of any aquatic invasive species such as Eurasian water milfoil, starry stonewort, or zebra mussels. If your watercraft is clean from these, you will not have an issue. Also, if your watercraft is drained from all water, live wells, village area, bait buckets, we want to make sure that all these watercrafts coming into a water body is drained of any water. And then dry. The recommended dry time is 5 days. You are allowed to go from one lake to another, but please be aware of what your status of infestation is on these lakes and try to plan accordingly to go from uninfested to infested water bodies. Our compliance rate at the access is a 98% compliance rate. So that means they're free of any AIS, they're drained of any water, and they meet all of the standards to enter that water body. And that is statewide too, and we see that throughout a lot of different counties throughout the state. You know, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I educate these watercraft inspectors to be passionate about educating the public on the proper protocols that we want to put in place when we're at the access. These watercraft inspectors aren't in it for the money. They are a part of the community just like I am, just like you are. We are a part of this bigger picture. And so they are there to educate you and help you so you can prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species and protect our waters. So a typical watercraft inspection only takes 3 to 5 minutes of your time. You know, that's basically going through a car wash or stopping at a stoplight. 3 to 5 minutes isn't really asking for much from the public to protect our water. So please take the time, be Minnesota nice, and let these watercraft inspectors perform an inspection on your watercraft. Crow Wing County this year started a pilot program that was awarded by the Minnesota DNR. Our pilot program was based around fishing tournaments and anglers, and we provided 250 kits to anglers. What that equipment and starter kit detailed was a towel, a sponge, a flashlight, and all these other education materials to provide you with proper information to do the right task at the access to stop aquatic invasive species. We worked around 3 different fishing tournaments. We hit all of the north part, the central part, and the south part of the county with these fishing tournaments. Fishing anglers, they use these water bodies just like recreationists, just like your public. They already know a lot of, you know, the infested versus uninfested. They know a lot about draining their water and doing the right thing. And they know and want to protect these water resources just like anybody else in the community. So in Crow Wing County, we have our Cross Lake Permanent Decontamination Station located just south of Cross Lake. And when I went there to go visit one of the watercraft inspectors on duty that day, I ran into an older couple that never knew about the decontamination station in Cross Lake, and they were wowed by the great service that they encountered at that decon and through the process. She was just over the moon and back about how great the inspector did, how courteous he was, and just overall the process of how to kill these aquatic invasive species. And she actually went back to her lake association and told people about this wonderful experience that they had. And so I highly encourage that if you haven't already participated in decontamination station, to do so, because it helps you, it helps the whole state accomplish our goal to prevent aquatic invasive species from entering our lakes. If you are planning to sell a water raft or a dock and lift, the best protocol that you want to put in place to protect from aquatic invasive species is to make sure that it's out of the water for 21 days dry time. That is really significant for stopping the spread. And having that communication with who you're going to sell it with your neighbor or whoever it may be, to make sure that you know that they follow the same protocol as you do, and so we have that less risk. If you are a new lake homeowner and you don't know the proper procedures or protocol in place to remove docks and lifts or prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, the odds are that that lake that you are now associated with has a lake association and they are familiar with what's been going on in the history of that lake. And they have main contacts to either the SWCD or the county or the Minnesota DNR to provide you with insight on what's the best management practices to stop aquatic invasive species. So asking your neighbor, hey, is there a lake association that I can be a part of? Be a part of those meetings, be a part of that community, and share your stories with them. Crow Wing County has been trying to extend its education and outreach in aquatic invasive species by hitting youth groups. And so this year we partnered with Nisswa City Park and a couple other organizations. We had 12 kids that showed up and they were just thrilled to learn about aquatic invasive species. They got to throw rakes off the dock and find zebra mussels, and they were just ecstatic about learning about them and how to protect the waters. And teaching that to their parents, and so that future generations can develop these skills over time, and we can start learning these behaviors at an earlier age so we can stop and prevent the spread. This year, Crow Wing County had 14 volunteers sign up for our Starry Trek event, which is statewide. Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Research Center puts on this event that is free and all supplies provided to you. And you basically just volunteer 4 hours in the morning. You come to a local site. You get to meet an aquatic coordinator just like myself, and you get to go through and learn about these invasive species. And then you actually get this equipment and you go out and you search different accesses throughout that county to see if you can find any new infestations. This year we didn't find any new infestations in Crow Wing County, but we highly encourage more participation for years to come. We have a lot of water recreationists out there, and you have a lot of water toys, and your kids like to float around with them. And we do have a lot of zebra mussel infested water bodies in northern Minnesota. And so if you want to just make sure that after you have your fun day on the lake, to make sure you roll them out or dry them out in your yard. If you have some water available, hot water is preferred, but if you just splash that down with some water and make sure that things are drained and washed down before using it on another water body. So new this year, Wing County has a new texting service where you can text CWC DCON to 72345, and that will pull up local decontaminations in your area, and you would just respond to the corresponding location that you would want more information at. This is a new service, and I highly suggest that you use it moving forward if you're going to be going to water bodies in northern Minnesota or Wing County lakes. We have an interactive map that you can view on our website, www.crowwing.us/AIS, where you can see all of our prevention plans, our goals, and implementation that we have in place year after year. We provided decontamination signs at 42 accesses throughout Wing County. These signs give you information about our Cross Lake Decon, also the Minnesota's interactive map decontamination locations throughout the state, and decontamination stations throughout Wing County. A lot of people travel from the cities up to northern Minnesota for vacation and recreation. In northern Minnesota, our population does triple, and so that means that we have a lot more pressure on our lakes. And so you can look on the Minnesota DNR Decontamination's website and see where a decontamination station is near you. Most of these decontamination stations are located on main highways, so the odds of you running into one or near one are very likely. And we also have a lot of county decontamination stations that if you are going to a certain county, I would highly suggest that you visit their website to know their aquatic invasive species plan and what they have in place. I've had a few lake associations contact me about protocols and procedures for float planes. We do see some of that in northern Minnesota on the bigger lakes, and so they work directly with me on how to succeed and proceed with those protocols in place. The reason why I got into aquatic invasive species is because as a young kid, I grew up on a river, and it was a really big impact to my life and my community. So I always knew that moving forward in life that I wanted to contribute to natural resources in these water bodies. And so I went to college to pursue a degree in this field, and now I am a successful AIS coordinator for Wing County.
Water gardens are beautiful additions to any landscaping project, yet they can also be an easy pathway for invasive species to spread. When you purchase plants for the garden, always ask, is this plant safe for Minnesota if it gets into the wild? ID every plant you have in possession. There are some that are unlawful to possess. Don't unwillingly get caught holding illegal weed. If you're at all unsure, destroy the plant. The Minnesota DNR is a fantastic resource for your water garden questions.
Oftentimes we believe because a plant grows in one pond, it's okay for all ponds or water systems. That is not true. Ask your plant retailer, is this plant okay growing on its own in the wild in Minnesota? Be aware if plants are prohibited or unlawful to possess. If you're ever unsure, destroy the plants. Invasive species spread at times without intention. A good example is purple loosestrife. We see it in bunches quite prominent amongst the wild of Minnesota, but this invasive was once sold as a decorative, ornamental plant. Help prevent the spread of unwanted invasives by keeping an open dialogue with your garden store or retailer and amongst your gardening friends. Together, we can share knowledge and work to preserve our Minnesota traditions.
Personal watercrafts provide hours of fun on the water. Like all watercrafts, they can spread AIS, so it is important to clean, drain, and dry after every use and before transporting to a new body of water. When putting your personal watercraft on the trailer, remember to take a close look at the underside and the intake. Drain the engine by starting it for 5 to 10 seconds to blow out any residual water and vegetation. These simple steps will help keep our Minnesota traditions alive.